Good morning. Welcome to the pastor's midweek message. We're into the third week of canceled church activities and everyone staying home and to help check the spread of the coronavirus. I know that for many of you this isolation is difficult. So here's a word of assurance from Psalm 46. God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear. Though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the sea, he makes us at peace. He says, be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. We can take comfort from this assurance. God is with us in this trial just as he has always been with us when the world around us is frightening and uncertain. Today for our prayer, I want us to remember Amy Pearson as she cares for her husband who is dying under hospice care. And also we learned this week that Amy Paddock died on March 25th. So I encourage you to leave those two in God's hands as you pray. Now let us pray. Gracious God, keep us under the shadow of your mercy during this time of uncertainty and distress. Sustain and support the anxious and fearful. Lift up all who are brought low, that we may rejoice in your comfort. Remind us by your Spirit's power that nothing can separate us from the love of God we have in Christ Jesus our Lord. Amen. Now, last week I promised that each week for the pastor's midweek message I would tell a story. So I'm reading stories from a collection I've written called Up the River Stories. If you didn't see last week's message, check it out because it has an introduction to the story collection. Today I'll just say again, these stories started out as brief vignettes about my upbringing in the mountains of North Carolina. But in time I found myself writing stories from later years and about current events, all from the perspective and in the style of Up the River. Today's story is titled simply, Growing Up. Growing up the river starts on the day you're born. You don't want to waste time with such an important task at hand. And every year, you celebrate being born. It's called your birthday. Had a birthday this year myself. It wasn't any trouble. So I plan to have another one next year. Birthdays are critical to growing up. Without them, you would surely run out of time before you got the hang of growing up. Growing up in the mountains of North Carolina is tricky. And there again, some folks never got the hang of it. I don't know if they just stopped growing or moved. And for sure, there's more to growing up than just birthdays. There's no end to the secrets and the potions and the habits one needs to learn if growing up is something to be desired. Granny Sharp always boiled it down to a daily cup of batwing tea. She said, batwing tea puts lead in your pencil. I sometimes thought growing up was just a matter of surviving the winter. It gets so cold up the river that chill bumps break off the body like icicles on the pump house roof. So you have to know a thing or two about staying warm. For example, when you're milking the cow at 5 a.m. in the dead of winter, your feet will be warm enough if you wear your boots, and your hands will be okay because the cow's teats are warm, and it helps to turn the collar of your pea coat up against the wind that howls through the barn. But of course, everyone knows that the most of our bodily warmth is lost through the tops of our heads. So the secret to staying warm in the aforementioned situation is to stick your head right up against the soft underbelly of old Kate, just in front of her hind leg. Have you got the picture? The tricky part is what to do when old Kate kicks because you've pinched her, or she arbitrarily decides to put her foot in the milk bucket. So you have to learn to feel the shudder, which, by the way, is harder to tell than the seasons in Florida. This reminds me of something I left out. Before you put your head right there against the underbelly of the cow, you have to take off your hat. Can't feel the shudder if you're wearing a hat. Clem Underwood from up on Sunburst made himself a skunk skin hat. Said it would warm the body from head to toe. Several folks up the river paid Clem a right good price to make a skunk skin hat for them. For a while there it was all the rage, but the aroma that come with the hat put some folks off. I was talking about feeling the shudder when old Kate decides to kick. Reaction time is important. When you feel the shudder, you have about a second to get your head out and to buck it up. Otherwise, you could be numbered among the ones who didn't get the hang of growing up in North Carolina. Growing up is a family affair. I was born the third of 4 boys to tenant farmers living up the river. My father bragged about raising his own field hands, and that's what we were. Hands that worked the fields to bring crops forth in season. It was a life of many lessons, the first of which was my suspicion that I was not cut out to be a farmer. Oh, I liked farming okay. I just couldn't get the hang of it. Had a hard time with the math. Dad said it took 13 months a year to raise a crop. Couldn't for the life of me figure out how that worked. Granddad didn't help matters any. When I asked him about it, he said, well, boy, a day is only as long as it is. While I had trouble with the math, the message was loud and clear. My dad and grandfather were part of a conspiracy to undo what my birth had set in motion. They were determined to see that I didn't grow up. I knew for certain they would work me to death before I was old enough to shave. But there was a curious inconsistency in their plan. Dad was also the prime instigator of long afternoon swims in the Pigeon River. Granddad encouraged daydreaming and exploring. Both thought young boys should play baseball. Do you see how that would confuse a kid? What sense does it make to indulge in such time-consuming leisure if the day isn't long enough, and if every year you lose a month? Looking back, I can see that Dad and Granddad were onto something. It turns out that everything worth doing takes 13 months a year. And even if a day is only as long as it is, it's still long enough for daydreaming. I reckon growing up is tricky wherever you try it. Someone said growing is an art. I think that must be true because growing is clearly a thing of beauty. I think of growing as a journey, the journey of a lifetime. Each day brings a new bend in the road and proffers something else to grow on. I tell you, I'm just going to stay with it. Just keep growing till I get the hang of it, or till I run out of birthdays. Thanks for listening. See you next time.